Why are we seeing increasing consumption rates? One major reason behind that is the rise of consumer culture tied up with market economies. The focus on the individual consumer has implications for how we deal with environmental problems. This will lead us into something called the individualization of responsibility, also known as the default frame for sustainability. It's the default, the go-to. How do we solve our problems? You need to use less. We need to do this. A major issue with the individualization of responsibility for environmental problems is it tends to gloss over the majority of what's causing our problems. This will bring us right into industrial food production. Even if we as individuals want to be more sustainable, our choices, our ability to do so is often limited by the broader structures, the system in which we live. And by the structures, I mean the way our society is set up, our political system, our economic system. What are the policies surrounding access to resources or prices? How is that set up? Okay, so, and again, you've seen this. What's a bigger threat to sustainability? Not enough resources or overconsumption? And the data indicates consumption is just as, if not more important. It's on the rise. We've been looking at examples of increasing consumption really just in the last few hundred years and really the last few decades. Massive increase in the amount of resources we're using, energy we're using, and the byproduct of that, all the pollution and other byproducts of making all that stuff. Increased consumption is related to the rise in consumer culture. So what's consumer culture? When the purchase, ownership, and use of stuff, of commodities and what they signify become the center of social life. Under consumer culture, what we need versus want versus desire, these tend to become merged, conflated. I need food, I need water, I need an iPhone, I need whiskey, a beer, whatever. Are these really needs? Importantly, the tangible object, the actual thing, the commodity, the thing you're buying, the object of consumption becomes less important than its culturally coded meaning, than its symbolic value. And a plastic bag could carry your stuff. So why do people buy Coach purses and Prada and other name brands? It's because a lot of what we buy, it's not so much about the use value, but the symbolic value, what it indicates about us or status or our own identity. And so consumerism defines not just us, but also the economy. Most of our workforce is involved in the production of consumer goods or services. And think about that. We're not involved in like growing food or building houses or sort of the basic needs stuff. We're involved in sort of making and selling stuff or services. This is what keeps the economy going. Economic growth is important in the capitalist system. When that stops, the system sort of stops. This is why you hear politicians talking about tax cuts to give people more money to spend to keep the economy going. And so one result is we get a lot of cheap stuff. The companies making it make a lot of money, but there's tons of externalized costs. There's tons of consequences to this, all the social and environmental externalities not actually included in that price tag. We watch the story of stuff that talks about some of this. The rise in consumer culture is new, it's recent. This does not characterize how humans have interacted for most of our history. It's inextricably tied up with the rise of market exchange, market economies. From an anthropological perspective, 3 broad types of exchange have characterized human existence: reciprocity, redistribution, and market exchange. Reciprocity exists in all societies, including our own, right? We practice it with our parents when we exchange Christmas gifts, or when we get a really nice gift and give our mom a macaroni necklace back, right? Generalized reciprocity. Redistribution occurs in some societies. It entails a certain type of social organization be present, namely a centralized authority that has the authority to collect goods and redistribute them on behalf of the group. For most of human existence, exchange is tied up with the stuff, the objects, but also the subjects, also the people, meeting basic needs, maintaining relationships. And so it's not just the stuff, it also shapes how we relate to each other. And market exchange shapes relationships in certain ways. 3 different types of reciprocity. Remember, general, balanced, and negative. In negative reciprocity, there's a cost, there's a harm incurred on one party in the exchange. Someone's getting less than they're giving. They're getting the short end of the stick, the crappy end of the deal. There's a harm done to one of the persons involved, whoever gets the bad end of the deal. And so I like to draw a parallel between negative reciprocity and market exchange. They're not the same, but the parallel is just like there's a cost in negative reciprocity. Someone's trying to get a better deal out of it, more bang for their buck. There's also costs in market exchange, but they don't fall on the parties directly involved in the exchange. The costs are externalized outside of the immediate exchange. The consumer is buying a cheap, phone, well, maybe not a phone, but cheap product, radio, food, and they're getting a really good price for that. So they're winning. There's no harm there, at least not monetarily. And the producer's also getting a good deal. They're making a lot of money off the stuff they're producing at a fairly low cost that they're selling. The harm is externalized outside of the people involved in the exchange, basically onto other people and other places. The only way all the production of all this cheap stuff is possible is through the way it's produced, through externalizing the true cost, not the social cost, not paying fair wages, exploitative labor, paying people less than $1 a day to work, 10, 12 hours in unsafe conditions, not providing healthcare, not having labor laws. And we externalize the cost of this production onto other places, other environments, through exporting our pollution back out to places that don't regulate it, right? Oh, we regulate it in the US, that's fine, I'll just do business overseas. And this is actually why so many companies in the US do business overseas, because there are not labor laws and there are not environmental pollution laws. So you go overseas, do your business there, and you can be polluting and exploitative, and there's no regulation to that, right? And so there's a cost, there's a harm done, but it's externalized onto other people and other places. It's not immediately visible in the market exchange, where the focus is sort of on the value, the price of that commodity. And it's really important that this is hidden, because if people knew the true cost of producing all this cheap stuff, they really might not buy it. They might not want to buy it if they knew the true cost. So it's purposely sort of hidden. It's covered up. So what this graph looks at, it's asking people, why are you going to college? Back in the 60s, sort of that green line, about 85% of students said, I'm going to college to develop a meaningful philosophy of life, to better understand the world that I live in. By 1999, that had almost flipped, right? So you had in the 60s only about 40% to be financially well off. Most people going to better understand the world. There's some overlap over 100% because some people probably picked both those reasons. By 1999, that's flipped. Almost 80% of people say they're going to school to be financially well off. And so the assumption here, the cultural assumption that is often, I think, subconscious to us, is that more money, material well-being, will translate into well-being, right? Happiness, if you will be better off. And think about how does when the media or the news or the president or politicians reference the economy, what do they focus on when they're talking about the economy is doing good? What do they tell us? What indicators do they use to index that, to show us, no, we're doing really well, look at this? You hear it probably almost every day. Yeah, William.
The stock market.
Yeah, the Dow Jones, the NASDAQ, the stock market. Does any of this actually relate to our ability to pay rent or feed ourselves? Mostly not, right? We index the stock market, GDP, GNP, wealth of the overall country. Does that actually tell you how people are doing? And so it's an assumption, and a problematic one, that more money, higher income automatically translates into well-being. And just one other side note, the overall sort of wealth of the country tells you nothing about how that wealth is distributed among the people. And while we talk about this, don't get me wrong, it's not that money doesn't matter. People need to be able to meet their needs. It definitely fucking matters. The question is, how much does it matter? Is there sort of a direct correlation or relationship between money, income, and well-being? And the answer is not quite. It matters, but only to an extent. We're going to look at some of that data here in just a minute. Has all this added consumption made us happier? First, we live in this sort of paradox in our society. We're considered wealthy, developed country, affluent, right? Meaning wealthy. We consider ourselves affluent, yet we live in scarcity, always needing more money, a different house, better car, the new phone, new clothes. And this is not an accident. Culture of consumption creates scarcity, creates wants, ever expanding sort of needs and desires through creating unlimited wants. Marketing, advertising, they play on our psychology, if you will, to get us to buy more stuff, to consume more so that they can make more money. Okay, so for example, say you get something new. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's your new phone or a new, piece of clothing or a new toy, game. I don't know. Get something new, and we're not saying stuff's bad either. It's just how much happiness does it actually bring? What happens, and I'm asking, after a little while, after you get something new, what sort of happens to your feeling about that thing after a certain period of time?
It wears off. It's not as new anymore.
Yeah, it sort of fades. Good. It fades. It's not permanent. It goes away, right? Till we get sort of something else. Or anyone, you ever order something, you're at a restaurant with other people and you sort of order something, but then end up being disappointed with it? Or like for me, I know I like to know what like everyone else is getting too before I make my final choice, lest I sort of make the wrong choice. So we get sort of buyer's remorse, or we think a lot about, is that actually the one that I want? And so if you only have one choice, right, then you don't run into this issue. That's the food. That's it. You're hungry, you eat it. But when you have all these choices, our psychology sort of gets us into trouble. So there's this author, Daniel Gilbert, and he wrote, we'll talk about this book in a second, but it's called Stumbling on Happiness. And it's not a how to become happy. I like what he's funny. He says in the book, this book's not about, it's about psychology and neuroscience and sort of how that all works. It's not a how-to on being happy, but after you've read it, you can come back to it to figure out why you're not happy. So it sort of explains how that works, but not what actually makes us happy. What he says is a lot of what gets us into trouble is our thinking about the future or the past. It's not actually the stuff that happens to us that we actually do. It's the stuff that the way we think about stuff. So a little bit more of a concrete example. Daniel Gilbert did this research study. They had two groups, group A, group B, and they have them come in to rate paintings, artwork on a scale of, good to not good. And it doesn't really matter because that's not what the researchers were actually looking at. They don't care about the artwork. It was looking at this idea of choice, stuff, and happiness. And so group A, they rated the paintings, 1 through 5, 1's the best, 5's, the worst. Group B, same thing. And then for group A, they said, as a reward for participating in the study, we're going to give you one of the paintings. And so you have a choice, group A. You can pick either your number 2 or your number 3 favorite painting. Pick one and it's yours. Group B, same thing. We're going to give you a reward. You get to take one of the paintings home, and this is the one you get to take home. We're going to give you the one that you picked as like rated number 2, the second best. So then they measured how happy people were with the painting they got in group A and B immediately after, like a few days later, and then a week later. So group A, who had the choice, group B had no choice, just given a painting. Group A immediately after, yeah, that's why I picked that. Sounds good. Same for group B. Oh, I got a free painting. Cool. Happy. About a day later, group A starts to slide a bit, and a big chunk of them not so happy. They're kind of questioning that I'm kind of reconsidering my decision. I kind of wish I had picked the other painting. They're less happy than they were right after they got it. Group B, a few days later, still pretty much same. Yeah, I'm still stoked. I got a free painting. Cool. A week later, 80% of group A was unhappy with the painting they had chosen. Group B, a week later, opposite. Everyone's still pretty much happy. And so the point is, it's that unlimited choice. It's that what could have been, what if it was this way? What if I had made that choice? Unlimited choice that gets us into trouble, because I could have all these things, right? And I want to be happy. What if I had chose that? I could have been happier, or this wouldn't have happened. It's our thinking about it that sort of gets us into trouble. Unlimited choices, which is what the consumer culture creates unlimited wants, makes it difficult to ever satisfy your needs, because what could have been, right? Could have been this. Anthropologists often refer to hunter-gatherer societies, foragers, the tribal world that Bodley talks about, as the original affluent society, meaning that they're wealthy. They're the original affluent group in the sense that they're well off. They have their needs met. They're wealthy in the sense of well-being. They desire little. They don't have this problem of unlimited sort of options and wants. And so they desire little, and they meet their needs, their desires, what they want, with what's available to them in their environment. They achieve affluence, wealth, well-being by wanting little, by limiting that, not having ever increasing, expanding needs. So the Kung, for example, if you're a Kung villager, this is the Yanomamo on the slide, actually, South America, horticultural group. If you're in these small scale societies, you're a Kung villager, you value equality. That's socially ingrained. Being the rugged individual that's better than everyone else, that is stigmatized. That is distasteful. People look down upon individuals that embody that. It's stigmatized. It's not valued among the group, that type of behavior. They value equality and all members of the society. They're egalitarian. They value everyone's needs being met. It's distasteful when your belly is full and the person next to you is going hungry. They're fairly modest, outwardly modest, right? Everyone has about the same stuff, which is not much, to say not much. And they're nomadic. They move around often. So no one really has very many possessions. Everyone has about the same stuff. If someone has something that you don't have, you could ask them for it. They'll probably give it to you, right? And so they achieve affluence by wanting little and by having the ability to meet their needs with their given environment, which isn't true for a lot of people today, right? A lot of indigenous groups, small scale societies, they've been pushed out of their lands, right? Pushed into sort of cities or wage work. They have limited wants. They meet their needs with their local environment. When you get enough things and everyone else around you has about the same things, and no media is there to bombard you with images that make you think you're not sexy enough or cool enough or smart enough, well, then enough really is enough, right? Bodley, just another thing from Bodley, he says, advertising works by promoting fantasies that persuade people that their real desires for love, family, friendships, adventure, sex can be obtained by purchasing commodities, right? That's what advertising does. Commodities, things that actually have no value in your life outside of the market price. So importantly, advertising, marketing, and they spend millions of dollars figuring out how to play on our psychology to get us to think, oh, well, if I could just get that, then I'd be better off, right? Then things would be this way. And also importantly, even if you don't fall into this trap, and I think a lot of us do to at least an extent, it's an underlying pattern in this country, right? That is not conscious to a lot of people. We sort of consume unconsciously. And rarely question, does this stuff actually make me happier, right? Maybe it's making you less happy. This way in which we attain affluency, wealth in the commercial world, in our own society, lies in stark contrast to how affluency was attained for most of human existence. Again, the original affluent society, tribal peoples, affluent by limiting what they want. They don't have ever expanding needs. When you have enough, enough is enough. And when no one else around you has other stuff, right? Enough is enough. On the flip side, there's two sides to this story. So other people would argue that we've been talking about some of the negative sides of consumerism. Some would say it also has positive social effects. So a couple of examples. One argument is that with so many differences among us, class, ethnic, regional, and gender differences, consumerism, consuming the same product or being interested in the same stuff, can allow people to come together in ways that they otherwise wouldn't. So groups of people divided on racial or gender or ethnic or geographic lines that wouldn't really typically come together end up coming together through consumerism, through car clubs or the Apple community or Black Friday or whatever it is, social media. And so it brings people together in ways that just wouldn't happen without it. That's one argument. Another example is that consumerism generates a vast array of products and experiences in its own right, right? We're not arguing that stuff is bad. I love some of my stuff, right? I like it. I use it all the time. You don't have to hate stuff, but it's about being conscious about what stuff actually matters, right? What actually helps you or improves your well-being or gives you joy or whatever. And what stuff doesn't. It's about being a little more conscious about that. How much stuff is going to make you happy? And so on that note, what is the relationship between happiness and consumption? This is a social survey poll. It said, taken all together, how would you say things are these days? Would you say you're very happy, pretty happy, or not too happy? And so what you're seeing is distribution of happiness in the US, how people responded, 1975 and compared with 1996. And I like this time period because it was roughly since 1980, Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, the Prime Minister of the UK, instituted neoliberal economic policy, the structural adjustment programs we talked about, where they gave loans to the developing world on the condition that the developing world restructured their economies so that they could grow and pay back the loan. And the net effect of that is it made these poor regions even poorer. So I like this time period because it's really in 1980, sort of the economic heyday of Ronald Reagan, where you see wealth start to really increase in the US, for example. There's a reason for that, right? There's a reason we have super wealthy areas, and that's intricately related to poor areas, right? Okay, so and since 2000, incomes really stagnated. So wages really haven't gone up, which is interesting because profit margins have increased enormously. Companies have become enormously more productive, but workers' wages haven't gone up. All that profit, all the increase in profits is just being siphoned off. It goes to the CEOs or the shareholders as benefits or bonuses. It's not actually redistributed. Okay, I'm digressing. So happiness, 1975, 32% very happy, 55% pretty happy, about 13% not doing too good. By 1996, 20 years later, when people were making a significant amount more money, had more stuff, house sizes have, almost doubled. People have more cars, they have more stuff, they're making more money. Happiness hasn't changed almost at all. Now you have 31% very happy. It's actually gone down a tiny bit. 58% pretty happy. That's almost the same. 11% not too happy. So we're making more money. We have more stuff than we did 20, 30, 60 years ago. Why aren't we any happier? This shows income compared with happiness. So 1946 to 1996. measured as GDP per head. So income per capita, how much is each person making? What's their wealth? GDP has been increasing throughout this time period. People are making more money, adjusted for inflation. The percent of people happy, you can see on the graph, hasn't increased. It's actually declined a little bit. On the numbers I just showed you, I looked them up the other night. They haven't really changed much. The reason why income has gone up, but happiness hasn't really changed. Money matters, but only to an extent. And it's more about relative income than your absolute income. So it's not about the actual number you're making. It's about how much you have, how much you're making relative to everyone else around you. Always sort of comparing below and above, this idea of keeping up with the Joneses, right? Okay, so on this table, 1975, it shows happiness broken up according to income level. So the top quarter, that's the richest 25% at this time. And there's a clear correlation here between income and happiness. About 41%, almost half in the richest 25% of society, very happy. About 52% pretty happy, only 7% not too happy. If you look at the bottom quarter, the poorest 25%, they tend to overall be less happy than the top quarter. Only about 26% of people in this income bracket very happy, 61% pretty happy, 13% not too happy. And so this chart shows you the correlation between income and happiness. The richer people tend to have higher levels of happiness at this time in the US. We would expect, as the bottom quarter became wealthier from 1975 to 1996, as they indeed did, right? They did, they're making more money, everyone is. We would expect happiness to increase, but it doesn't. It remains flat. Everyone, the rich people and the poor people, are making more money, more income, have more stuff 20 years later, but happiness hasn't really changed. Again, because it has to do with relative position more so than absolute income. I think I'm happy, but I'm not sure. We're always kind of comparing, right? I could have had this, but they have this. Money matters to an extent. What you can see here is the relationship, correlation rather, between happiness and income broken down by country, so sort of different societies. If you look at the red line, that's 15. So the bottom horizontal axis is income, vertical is happiness, measured by sort of two questions, you know, are you satisfied with life and how happy are you? Once you get over 15,000 per head, there tends to be a correlation with more happiness, right? We don't see anyone down in the bottom over here, right? Everyone's sort of up decent levels of happiness. If you look at the poorest countries making 1,000, 2,000 per capita per year, also a correlation with people that are less happy. No, not a direct correlation, but you could be sort of, let's see, Ukraine's down here. The Philippines, though, in the same income bracket is like 50% happier. So there's other things going on besides just money. For example, do you have access to resources in your environment? Can you subsist off your local resources rather than being forced into the wage economy, the cash economy? It's not just about money. And so kind of a few keys. If you are super poor, if you are below the breadline and you cannot meet your basic needs, food, water, basic needs, there's a pretty strong correlation of people being less happy. It does matter to an extent. You got to be able to meet your basic biological needs. You're not going to be too happy. On the flip side, if you're super rich, you're in sort of the top of society, tends to be a correlation. People tend to be relatively happier. It is for everyone else in the middle, right, that there's no real correlation or relationship. Because again, we're always sort of comparing. It's about where you are relative to everyone else rather than just your absolute income. Happiness has not increased in the last 50 years. Can we do better, especially for the people who are least happy? Again, rich people tend to be happier. 20 years later, everyone's wealthier, but happiness hasn't changed. And there's a couple of key things going on here. One, if an individual in a society becomes richer, they tend to become happier because relative to everyone else, they are now doing better. If the whole society becomes richer, no one becomes any happier, right? Again, it's about a lot of this relative versus absolute income, always sort of comparing what could be, or, oh, I'm glad I'm not down there, but I wish I was sort of here. This one's interesting. It shows people's increasing needs. They were asked, what's the smallest amount of money a family of, I think, 4 needs to get by? And so if you look, the solid line, that's actual income, but the amount of money people said they need rises directly in line with what they're actually making. So like in 1970, they're making a lot more than what they used to make and what they used to think they needed. Just as their income has rose, what they think they need to get by has also risen. So essentially, as people's ability to consume more expands, their needs expand, or at least what they think they need. Another example of what we're getting at here. It's a really great documentary called I Am. And yeah, I highly recommend if you can find it. The guy that made the movie, Tom Shadyac, and he was the director of like Ace Ventura. You guys all know that one. So he is a success story. This is sort of, I'm not sure when it was made, but sort of early 2000s. He is making all these blockbuster hits. He's becoming famous, well-known. He's making great art. He's doing what he wants to do. He moves into this new mansion in the Hollywood Hills. And this is sort of the opening of the documentary I Am, which explores the relationship between sort of stuff and happiness. So he's living the good life. He walks into his new mansion and it kind of dawns on him, he's not like any happier. Like, he's made it. He's a success. He's in this giant mansion, way bigger than his old house. He doesn't really feel any different. Then Tom Shadyac gets in this really bad accident and ends up in the hospital for like half a year. He starts getting super depressed, and he's basically, this is him talking, right? He's basically thinking about committing suicide, ending it. At the same time, he's also thinking about all the stuff he sees around him, all these other social ills, poverty, suicide, mental health issues, just people struggling. And so he decides to sort of explore some of these questions he has. If he's going to kill himself, hey, you know what? I'm going to dig into this first. And so he makes this documentary, I Am. Again, it's really good. Highly recommend. There's an example in it that I want to draw out for you. So he's talking to this scientist, and the scientist gives an example. He says, the thing about consumption and happiness and what gets us into trouble is there's a truth and a lie to the idea that stuff, more money can make you more happier. There's some truth to that, but there's also not truth to that. So here's the truth. You are out walking in the mountains and it's getting cold. It's wintertime. It's snowy. You apparently don't live in San Diego and you're lost. It's getting dark. You're fucked. You don't know how the hell to get out of there. You didn't tell anyone where you were going. You don't have GPS. You're starting to get in really big trouble. Like your life depends on it. And you're panicking. You're getting cold. You're shaking. All of a sudden, you come across a little cabin. The lights are on. There's someone there. And they invite you in. They've got a fire going. So there's a little bit of heat, warm you up from the frigid cold, maybe a little bit of tea, or if you're lucky, even a little bit of soup or some crackers, something, I don't know, maybe some whiskey. And all of a sudden, a little bit of stuff, a little bit of heat, a little bit of hot water, a little bit of safety, knowing where you are, a little bit of stuff has made you a whole lot happier. You are a lot happier than you were the 10 minutes before you found that cabin, when you weren't sure if you were going to be alive the next day. Little bit of stuff has made you a whole lot happier. And that's the truth. That's the truth. The lie then is that much more stuff will make you that much happier, right? That's the lie. A little bit of stuff, yeah, can go a really long way. The trick, the lie, is that much more stuff will bring you that much more happiness. And it doesn't work that way, because there's so much more that goes into well-being and happiness than just income. Again, if you're below the breadline, that matters. Super wealthy tend to have your needs taken care of, and then some. There's a correlation there. Everyone else in the middle, no real correlation. Sort of last note on this relationship between consumption and happiness. Daniel Gilbert, who wrote Stumbling on Happiness. And one of the main points, again, it's our thinking that sort of gets us into trouble. So stumble into life, do stuff, and it'll sort of work out, even if it ends up being something that you didn't want to happen. Again, we underestimate our ability to look at that more positively in retrospect. You know what, in the end, that made me a stronger person, or made me who I am. So sort of do stuff. A main point is that the research, the data shows, it's not income, money, or stuff that are the biggest predictors of happiness, but experiences and social relationships. These are the keys. Just to read a few excerpts. We know that the best predictor of human happiness is human relationships and the amount of time that people spend with family and friends. We know that it's significantly more important than money and somewhat more important than health. That's what the data shows. The interesting thing is that people will sacrifice social relationships to get other things that won't make them as happy. Money. And that's what I mean when I say people should do wise shopping for happiness. Another thing we know from studies is that people tend to take more pleasure in experiences than things. So if you have X amount of dollars to spend on a vacation or a good meal or a movie with friends, it will get you more happiness than a durable good or object. Again, that joy kind of fades when that thing's no longer new, or we have buyer's remorse. One reason for this is experiences tend to be shared with other people. Objects usually aren't. And, my 2 cents, I know when I'm sort of daydreaming and thinking about stuff, maybe it's like that new shirt or new phone for a day or two, but usually it's, trips or traveling or friends or inside jokes, right? Relationships and experiences. These are the biggest predictors of happiness. Okay. So food for thought in terms of the relationship between consumption and happiness. Money, it matters to an extent, but that much more, is $1 billion more dollars going to make you 1 billion times happier? No. Okay. And so this focus on consumerism, the individual consumer, it trickles into how we address environmental issues in our society.